Hello, my name is Anders, and I was just talking to my team, trying to get them rallied. We're making maybe 100,000 a day in affiliate marketing, passive income, leveraged through AI and crypto, and you can too, if you just follow my advice. And the number one secret I was just telling everyone about here really is that I watch Thorin's YouTube channel. You should too.
This episode of Gamer Supps Thought of the Day is brought to you by the flavour lemonade. It's one of the all-time classics. Get 10% off everything on gamersupps.gg using the code Thorin, Thorin. Now, I always like to come with a different angle or perspective or some food for thought about someone that we all think we know the career of, we know the set narratives of. We've had the same discussions many times over. So when it comes to the career of Karrigan, I always like to look at the unique things he's been able to do in his career. And one of the problems you have when you were evaluating who the best in-game leader is, who the greatest is, who was the best in a specific time, who's number one at one point is, it's obviously not a 1-versus-1 game. They're not playing Quake or StarCraft where it's just them doing everything and it's their mind mixed with their skills, their mentality. It's all of that, and there's all their teammates, there's the opposition, there's coaches, there's analysts, there's the meta changing, etc. So in my opinion, when it comes to positions like in-game leader, you have to immediately start to ask and control for who did they play with, what pieces did they have to work with, how good were they, how bad were they, how easy were they to adapt to, how difficult was it, how much of a challenge, but also who are they playing against? Are they playing against the best team of all time? Are they playing against a team that directly counters their style or has a generational player who's in his pomp on that squad, and that's what directly counters you? So it's a bit like when you're considering who the best quarterback is in the NFL. I always say you don't look at the raw stats or who won the ring. You ask yourself these two questions. How good are their offensive pieces and what were they able to do with it? So how good are their pieces as their team? And more importantly, in the NFL, you only play against the other team's defense. It's not about the other team's quarterback and all that. It's about how good is the other team's defense and how good are they specifically at scheming for your quarterback and his offensive players. That's what's going to give you a sense, win or lose, as to how good a job you did. So if you look at a lot of the best in-game leaders of all time, the people we automatically hail as the greatest, they tend to be the people who won the trophies, which means they were the in-game leaders of the top teams. By the way, once you get to be an in-game leader of a top team, you tend to be able to stay there for many, many years. It's the other pieces move around you. You don't tend to move between teams as much, and similarly, you don't tend to get kicked as much if you're an all-time great. And so typically we're just saying, right, what order are we picking of the in-game leaders of the best teams that had the best players, and then we're just deciding, right, does Karrigan go below Glaive but above Apex, but then does he go above Snappy, or does Snappy go above, and you're just trying to figure it out like that. So in my opinion, it's too easy to think, well, the best in-game leader just had the best team and the best star. That is the general rule of thumb. But as a result, that's what people expect. They expect if you have the all-time great players, you're going to be the one who wins the championship. So while it's certainly very impressive to win with the absolute best players you can have, especially in their peak, I also think it makes it more noticeable when you win without those players. So here's a stat line for you that is a fucking banger about Karrigan. Karrigan has won a major, it was obviously the CS2 major, PGL Antwerp, without a top 10 player of all time. Assuming we'll talk about CS2 and CSGO collectively there. So if you think he won his major and who were the best players on his team historically, right? The best one was Rops in terms of like where Rops already was in his career. He was the best player on the team. And then you look like in the world, he was certainly like, he was probably like the 6th best player or 5th best player in the world. In terms of history, Twists is certainly up there with his accomplishments, but not like as a number 1A superstar player. Rain, once upon a time, many, many, many years earlier, was extremely good, but then it'd be more of a role player. So you look who he won with, some very good players, one extremely good player, but no superstar player in the same sense of some of the others, and certainly not a top 10 player of all time at that point in their careers. So you look instead, Fallen, he can't say that. Glaive, absolutely not. Pronax, none of these people, and these are all people who've won multiple majors, none of them can say they won a major without a top 10 player of all time. Pronax obviously had prime Olofmeister, who might have done the most of any superstar player at the time that won a major. Obviously, Nico hasn't won a major yet. Glaive had prime Device in the years he won his majors. Device was also excellent in 2019, by the way, when the rest of the team fell off. And obviously, Fallen had peak Cold Zera, one of the most well-rounded, masterful players to ever play Counter-Strike. So that's not a diss to those in-game leaders. It's actually a feather in the cap of Karrigan that he was able to win a major without a top 10 player of all time. That means he didn't have a player to just save him if he made a bunch of bad calls. He didn't have a player who could just steal him a map that he's not supposed to win in the veto, or when his team's down a map. He doesn't have a player who can just by force of nature, like Donk did at this last major, just overpower an entire tournament and win regardless of what you're doing, you're calling, how prepared you are, how good the opposition is. Now, you can even say, by the way, the obvious example of this is, remember when they actually won IEM Cologne in that epic 5-game series against Na'Vi? Immediately, Simple just got the MVP, even though Karrigan's team just won what might be the best final ever. Epic fashion, loads of great calls, great plays from everyone. It was a guy on the losing team who got the MVP, as if to highlight how impactful the all-time great players are, and the fact Karrigan didn't have one. Now, certainly, Karrigan failed to win a major with an all-time great player. That's a top 10 player of all time. He had prime Nico. He even had sort of like latter prime / almost prime Guardian in that FaZe clan. But that's beside the point. He didn't do it with those teams. Plenty of other people haven't done it with people like Nico as well, by the way. The point is, he was able to win a major without a top 10 player of all time. And that's actually one of the cool things about Karrigan's careers. You notice he's had kind of a unique way to find his own success. It's never just been, I did a better version of what someone before me did, or I just like beat your numbers. His approach is always like, he almost pioneers his approach. He's the guy who went and did the international team thing. I mean, he obviously tried to win with like the super team phase. He was able to do that later with a not as good super team phase in CS2. Obviously, technically Apex had won with like an international squad before that. But you go and you look, it was obviously the mouse period especially really showed like he can work with even like at the time sort of the 1.5 tier of elite talents internationally. He was working with some of the cast-offs in that squad. He didn't even get the original mouse with Sonny and Oscar and all those guys. He had to get the next generation of mouse players that were brought up from the other teams and sourced together, etc. So one thing I think is cool is his career almost has like a Grail Quest component, where if you don't know, one of the cool aspects of the Grail Quest was the idea of that the knights would go and you would enter the forest in the place where it was darkest and no way had been cut down before you, because that way you knew you were the one who was sort of charting a course towards finding the Grail by your own merit. You weren't just following someone else's footsteps or copying what they did and going in a direction they told you to. You were supposed to go where your soul or your sort of spirit moved you to go towards, so that you would be magnetically pulled towards your final destination, which was to find the Grail or whatever that represents to you. In this case, the Grail is to win a major, which is obviously the ultimate goal for an in-game leader in Counter-Strike. Oh yeah? You and whose army? Well, how about the Skrilluminati for one? They're the people who support my content. This video was kindly supported by The Concept, Matt, Pugnatio, Rajcula, Thooorin, Jensen Goh, Tosh, Jasun, Banediesel, Animosity, and you know it, everyone does. A special thanks goes out to my main man, Jerky's Minion, for the long-term support. Do you want to ask a question for my AMA videos? Would you like teasers? Find out what upcoming guests I've got? You want to suggest a topic or a guest? Maybe you want to be part of one of those 1 hour lengthy online discussions I do, where the topics are set by you. Well, if any of these perks or more tickle your fancy, I think you know what to do by now. Put your money where your mouth is and join the Skrilluminati, where Patreon link in the description below.